Good evening, folks. Tonight we have a very special episode for you. On July 22nd, 2025, Julian LeFay's family, colleagues at OnceLost Games, and fans around the world lost one of the most influential men in computer role-playing games, Julian LeFay. Tonight we celebrate his life, career, and his legacy. It is my very great honor to present to you our guests, Shae, the daughter of the late, great Julian LeFay.
Hello.
And Ted Perterson, lifelong colleague, co-creator, and great friend of Julian.
Hey, guys.
Thanks very much for being here tonight, helping those listening gain some insight on a man we all admire. So tonight's dedicated to Julian. We all love him from afar, but Shae and Ted, obviously you knew him as well as anyone could know a person. So I'd like to kind of get a an idea as to who Julian really was, so we can really understand who the man was that certainly Ted you and he drove the creation of the Elder Scrolls. You and he came back together for the Wayward realms. So we really want to get to know, what he was like. Now I understand he was actually, he was born Benny Jensen in Denmark. What was life like for Julian as a child living in the 60s in Denmark?
Well, I will say, first of all, I'm actually surprised that you knew his legal name.
I think I might have given that away.
Okay. So, because I was gonna say, it isn't really online.
No, I changed that in a wiki.
I was gonna say, I think that there was a wiki discussion about it.
Yes.
Where people were trying to figure out, wait, was it Julian Jensen or Julian LeFay, or what was it? And then I'm guessing that you kind of went in with Benny there.
Well, only because someone was his name was Julian Jensen, and I was like, well.
To be fair, on a lot of legal documents that I've been finding, apparently it was, but it wasn't technically legal,
if wiki is a thing of record, then I was like, well, let's just get that right.
When this comes out, a lot of things will be able to be set straight by referencing this, I guess.
Yes.
Anyway, so no, but I mean, he was named after his father. But that being said, he didn't know his father.
Oh.
I actually found the documents kind of talking about questioning the paternity and stuff like that. And his father paid child support his entire life, but never met him. Only have a few pictures of him. But but not only that, he was brought up by his grandparents. His mom couldn't really take care of him, and she ended up moving to Sweden. And then he ended up being raised by his grandparents, who, when he referred to his parents, he would always mean his grandparents.
Yeah.
And they were just kind of from what he talked about, it was super wholesome and super sweet. And I mean, obviously, he lost them at a fairly young age. Well, I don't know if that's obvious, but he lost his last true parent when he was around 18. And then he was kind of more or less homeless, but did all kinds of things when it came to not exactly homeless, but he was living in kind of the Danish version of a halfway house. Which, not because he was an offender or not because he was on drugs or anything like that, but because he had nowhere else to go.
Right.
And, eventually he ended up, starting bands, all these other things. But then he also spent a good amount of years, I believe, in the circus. Where mostly, yeah, he mostly took care of elephants. And was kind of the person who kind of pulled the curtain back and kind of the behind the scenes person dealing with stuff like that, you know. He's also one of the, like, you know, first members of the Vampire Society in Denmark, and like kind of, you know, there are articles in the newspapers with him in like full vampire gear because people were celebrating Halloween, and he was one of the first people to kind of like show up doing that. So, you know, when it came to his childhood, it was pretty normal. But the second that he kind of got...
It doesn't sound that way. Like running off to the circus.
Well, no, but I'm just saying the second he kind of got into his teen years,
right,
then like, yeah, he kind of started having the life that everybody kind of... Well, I mean, I don't know how much he talked about anything, but you know, it was the kind of life where he always said that he lived enough for the next 10 people because he'd experienced so much, right? And that very much started kind of in his teen years with all of this stuff.
It sounds like he had it tough, you know. The kind of person that you know, if you have it tough like that, you kind of go one of two ways from what I understand. You either go that same way and give tough out to the world, or you kind of understand where you came from and evolve, and then give better out to the world. And it seems like your father made a hard choice to use some of that experience to lead and be generous.
You know, I don't think that he'd ever characterize it as a choice. I don't think that he'd ever characterize it as, I am using this actively for my benefit, or having made this decision to use these experiences for something that's going to benefit everybody. He was very much a creature of passion. And I think that the main reason why he ended up doing anything that he ever did was really because of the fact that he was extremely passionate about it. And he was just driven by that. And I don't think that it came from anything. I don't think that it came from the background. I don't think that it came from anything other than, ooh, this is fun. Let me do that. And so when it came to leading and when it came to all these other things, he never saw himself, and he never like followed those pursuits in with that mindset. It was literally just, this is really interesting to me, and I'm going to give my all for that, right?
No, but he certainly had strong opinions about leadership and, you know, what it takes to make...
But that's also because he'd been under a million different forms of leadership, going from being a dishwasher in the Chinese tower in Tivoli in Denmark, to being in a circus, to being at a company that didn't treat him very well, and then at Bethesda, and then, you know, he's been under a lot of management. He had opinions about it because he knew better. Mm-hmm. I don't blame him for that for 1 second.
Shae, hearing you say that your father was part of the circus makes me wonder if there's like, you know, a picture out there of him in like, you know, trapeze artist tights somewhere.
Honestly, I wish. I have been going through everything in the house, and I've been finding stuff like going back to his childhood and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I am finding like there's kind of a gap when it comes to the pictures. Kind of ends when his grandma died, more or less.
Right.
And then we don't get pictures until we start getting articles about the band or about, you know, the Vampire Society of Copenhagen or whatever it is. No, that was actually like, that is one of the best articles. It's a very good picture of him sitting around with fangs.
Ted, I want to jump over to you on this one. Did you, when you and Julian worked together at Bethesda, did you know anything about the Vampire Society of Copenhagen?
To be honest, this is the first I'm hearing of it, which is really funny because we played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade, the role-playing game, and he never let on that he was actually a vampire, like the whole time. Like I was like, that would have been useful, but
that's really funny. I mean, when my mom met him, she always said that he lived like a vampire. So I'm like,
no. I'm not surprised.
I feel like that would be obvious.
I'm not surprised. I'm just saying he never volunteered that to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the subject matter was there for the taking. You're playing Vampire the Masquerade, you know. I mean, I would have been like, while I was in Copenhagen.
No, like I didn't have to talk him into playing the game. He was just like, "Oh yeah, I can do that," and but he never gave me background as to why he would be perfect for this.
Little did you know, Ted.
I do have those articles. I'll be happy to scan them in for you.
You know, I want them.
So let's jump over to Russia Heat, the band that Julian was a part of. I want to ask you. You had brought up before about your father ran to things that seemed like fun. He was driven by passion. I connect in a very meaningful way to that sort of spirit. So I want to spend a minute or two kind of talking about that and his love for music. How did your father's love for creating music develop, and what can you tell us regarding his time in Russia Heat, the electropop band?
Well, so unfortunately, I'm a little annoyed about this, but like I did actually get in contact with one of his band members recently, and he's given me his phone number, and we were going to talk, and I wanted to do it before we actually had this whole thing. But unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to, so I don't have any more details on that, aside from the fact that I think I see a pattern in my dad's behavior when it comes to both kind of getting into music and when it comes to getting into any sort of tech programming, anything like that, and about his motivations and about how he did that. And so I will say, like, when it came to the music, I mean, like, Russia Heat was the first, electro synth pop type of stuff in Denmark, right? And that's part of the reason as to why they became so popular.
Wow.
At least as far as I'm aware. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
from my experience with Danish electropop music, I will verify what you said.
Yeah. I mean, like that's what everybody who has told me anything about this period. I mean, obviously I wasn't alive at this point, so I don't know. But anybody who's told me anything about this period has kind of told me that was kind of, the first time they saw a Danish band properly doing it, and they had heard, Depeche Mode or whatever it was at the time, and thinking like, "Ooh, this was just the coolest thing." Yeah. And so I think that in general, when it came to my dad, I think that the reason he got into music is because at this point it was, again, yet a problem for him to solve, kind of, where it was just kind of like it's a series of like logical ways of doing a certain thing, and when it comes to electro synth pop, like it is programming, it is beats that are fun to manipulate and figure out in a way that's pleasing, and like I think that puzzle and that kind of like challenge made him really interested in it.
Yeah, I sort of, see like a very loose connection here between lacing beats for an electro pop band and getting into programming. It almost like seems like it has very like it has like the same roots.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does.
From looking through all of my dad's stuff, I can definitely tell how the progression kind of like developed when it came to that.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I mean, like, so it's one of those things, like, and I'm afraid that I literally just shipped this home yesterday. But his the LP.
Her home being Denmark, also.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, sorry.
Dual citizenship.
I'm currently at my dad's house, and I live in Denmark. So when I say shipped home, my boyfriend left yesterday, and I sent the most important stuff with him in his suitcase so that I could make sure that it went back to Denmark. Got it. But yeah, the LP for his band, and I think that it's also kind of online in different places where it says like, but specifically when it says the credits for the music, it says programming. Like, because when it comes to the synth, pop, all that stuff, there is a certain element of kind of an old school sort of programming that goes into it, right?
Right.
You know, you got to sample, you got to actually use a computer in order to do it the right way, in order to program your synthesizers and all these other things, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, I think that like his main motivation was always just kind of like the novelty and curiosity in sort of figuring out how things worked.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we can say this about so many of his hobbies.
And that's what I mean. Like, I've actually, like, as I was kind of like thinking about like doing this podcast, and as I was looking kind of like at what we might talk about, I was just kind of going through it and just like looking at, wait a minute, but then this led to this, and then this led to this, and this led to this. And you can see that with all of his hobbies. There's always one thing that starts it off, and then it develops into like 20 different hobbies off of that one thing. And when it came to the music, I think that that is kind of like the main passion that led to programming because of the way that it works.
Yeah. So what other hobbies, did he have that was, it seems like, your father's interest was, very much in problem solving. And it seemed like he was very interested in computers in the 80s, because they were, becoming very popular at the time. So he wanted to like understand that. And I guess that led to, plus his love of music kind of led to the, and pop stuff. So, with that, what other hobbies did he have that kind of followed, in that vein?
I mean, that's really hard to say, honestly. I will say that, like, if you're gonna,
I mean, we can trade them off. At least the ones I know of. But
yeah,
I mean, like, I think that the point is that, like, you can't say that one thing led to the other, because there was about 4 bajillion hobbies, and all of them jumped off of one
like,
tiny little point.
It was a complete thing where he just ate to keep alive, and like there was no interest in different tastes or anything having to do with that. And then all of a sudden, like, he became like Mr. Foodie and was like, I need to understand exactly how everything comes together and what the right flavor combinations are, and get all the equipment to make whatever's going on. You're like, well, this is not based on a thing of like, I'm a guy who's like a real, like, has a gourmet taste. Like, it was just like, how does everything work?
It was a need to understand.
That's right.
It was always a need to understand more so than anything else. And you need to be challenged and understand things.
Right.
And I was there for the foodie thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I moved back and forth between Denmark and the US. And I happened to move back to the US to live with my dad right when he got into the foodie phase. And it was right when he moved to New York, and he had realized, like, there were so many different cuisines, so many different flavors, so many things, and all of a sudden he realized he didn't know anything. And like, he would keep doing this anytime he got into a new sphere of like a new group of people or a new city or a new anything, really. He would be like, wait a minute, there's too much that I don't know. So now I'm going to pick one thing and I'm going to dive headfirst into this and understand every single thing about that. And so that's why I know so much about cooking. That's why I'm a good cook. It's because I moved over there when he was learning all about this. And we were living in New York, and he was going all these nice restaurants, and he didn't understand what was really going on. And people were talking about, ooh, this is so great, and this is so great. And so he felt the need to have to find a way to explain that, mostly using like science, logic, etc.
So you mean to tell me that one of the gentlemen who created the Elder Scrolls series, which is a lot of exploration in it, really enjoyed the act of exploring?
What a shocker.
You know what? That's such a good way to put it. I didn't even think about it in that way. Yeah, absolutely.
I just made that connection now. I'm like, this sounds a lot like playing your own Elder Scrolls game. I mean, you're literally like just exploring around to discover things, and that seems so much.
That's so true.
how your father, thought of things and discovered things in his own right. I mean, I don't even know if I'm hitting the nail on the head here, Ted, but to hear you and Julian in our first episode talk about how Arena was developed, it seemed to just kind of morph out of this idea of going from a game about gladiatorial matches to let's add more, and it just kind of got out of control. At what point did you and Julian look at each other and be like, we should have a heavy element of exploration, or is that just kind of like a byproduct of the things you had put in the game?
Well, exploration was not, in fairness, it was more of a Daggerfall thing than an Arena thing, because we had a proc gen world in Arena, but once you got outside of the cities and started wandering in one direction, the landscape would keep on building on top of itself, and then you would walk back and you'd be right at the city gates. So it was really a city game. There were certainly some parts of it that we wanted people to discover, but as opposed to Daggerfall, where it's wander and maybe you'll find a tomb, maybe you'll find whatever. I think we got more into that with Daggerfall than in Arena.
And that was intentional.
Well, I mean, it's certainly something we enjoy. So
yeah, right. Wow. Just some food for thought there. It's I don't know if it was if he intentionally did that, but
it's what we enjoy. So we'll we'll throw it in there, hoping that other people enjoy it too.
At this point, when it came to either Arena or Daggerfall, at what point did you guys actually start having the role playing groups where you do vampire or whatever at the house?
I think very early. I mean, I think probably in Arena. We started. I'm sure you've heard the story. I think our first dungeon master was Vijay, and it was, and we were all excited, and we hadn't played in a long time. We gathered around and created our characters and did everything, and then we were 10, 15 minutes into the game where we went, wait, this is the Temple of Elemental Evil, isn't it? And he's like, yeah. And I was I think that came with the game. It's not even...
Well, wait, hang on. So you guys had done too much background research, or he did not put enough effort into the actual campaign? Which one is it?
I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but I'm going to go with the latter, that we were familiar enough with Dungeons & Dragons to recognize a very preliminary module.
I have about 400 books sitting in this closet right now. All TTRPG books. Most of them from TSR back in the day, right? Yeah, my dad was already very well familiar. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think Bruce Nesbitt
very well familiar. Yeah. I was going to say. Wait, hang on. Continue that thought just so other people can hear.
That's right. I know we're going all over the place.
Let's hear it. What, Ted?
Well, we hired on Bruce Nesbitt during Daggerfall, and he was a TSR game designer, and so he showed up. I can't remember what edition Dungeons and Dragons he had, but he brought in 7 boxes worth of books.
Be AD&D. AD&D second edition, most likely.
Second or third or whatever. What?
It would have been an AD&D second edition at that time, and also considering the books that he has.
Early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s.
So it was a thing where you just hey, it's a Thieves' Handbook. This might be useful in making Daggerfall or whatever. So he brought over a whole bunch of handbooks, which I guess Julian held on to.
That's so cool. Those are some of the ones that I've been keeping. So,
wow, incredible. Bruce Nesmith was he did a lot of work with the Dragonlance series, I think.
I'm not positive about his whole career. I know that I think probably in the early 90s. I think it was probably before TSR was bought out by Wizards, and so I think it was starting to people were being let go, and so he switched over to video games.
All right. Well, I think we're squarely in your father's career here, getting into game design. I kind of want to go through. I was actually surprised by this. I want to go through the list of your father's credits before Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
It seems like his love of music is kind of what ushered him into the interest of video games. So in 1998, working with EA, he was credited for the music in Sword of Sodan.
Wait, 1988.
Yeah.
Okay, you said 1998. I was like, wait a minute, where are we?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, 1988. I apologize.
Yeah. Okay, no, sorry.
Yes, music for Sword of Sodan. Then credited for game design, coding, and music for Wayne Gretzky Hockey, which he did for Bethesda.
Yeah.
Then he got to work on Dragon's Lair in '89 for the coding. So now we're starting to see the music.
Was that a port? Do you know?
This was credited for with Advanced Microcomputer Systems, which wasn't that Don Bluth's thing?
Well, I mean, Dragon Slayer was definitely a Don Bluthy thing.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, like, so it's been very confusing for me. I never actually directly asked my dad about this, but when it came to the Dragon Slayer stuff, like, his involvement has been kind of like, okay, well, yeah, he did some of the music, but only for the NES system or something like that, and then like, also potentially some of the coding. And again, I never like clarified anything with him, and I feel like the online resources for like actually what his role in that was is interesting and confusing.
Probably oversimplified.
There was a big Dragon's Lair poster.
Most likely, given his dedication to stuff.
No, I was going to say there was a big Dragon's Lair poster at Bethesda. So, like, we took credit for it anyhow.
Yeah. I will say, given my dad's involvement in generally anything, like, even if he's not credited a lot of the time, if he was interested in it, he would have been a really big part of it usually.
So then I kind of want to stick on that for a second there, Shae. I mean, how do we digest that one? Because you're saying if he was given a small role, he would have taken a big part, and then Ted was like, "Yeah, that's fair." So, like, what do we glean from that on your dad there? Like, obviously passion was massive for him.
It was one of those things that, like, in general, like, he would never push himself on anything, but if he was really excited about something, man, the guy could talk, right? As you probably have seen, you guys have spoken to him, he could talk and put in his input, and he would always be, like, kind of ready and willing to kind of, like, say, well, okay, if you need me to do that on this, then, like, because, I have this really good idea, and, like, if I'm gonna do that, or, like, if you want to do that, like, don't worry about it. Like, I can definitely, like, I will just, like, put in the effort for you right there. Like, don't worry about it because, like, it was my idea and I'm really excited about it, right? Or, like, I've already done, like, 20 lines of code at home. So, like, let's just go, So it's not one of those things where it's just kind of like, he would never push himself. He would just be really excited about stuff.
Yeah.
Ted, and then, so that's all I can imagine about this particular thing where it's like, I don't know what the credits would be, but just kind of like his enthusiasm about everything would kind of mean that he just was a big part of things in general.
Yeah. Now, Ted, with your work with him during Elder Scrolls at Bethesda, I mean, how does that jive?
What with his enthusiasm and well, I mean, I will always say that Julian was the best programmer I ever worked with. I don't think I was ready for him at the time that we initially worked together on Arena and Daggerfall, in the sense that, like, I would come to him and say, hey, we should have werewolves in the game. And he's like, okay, well, how would that work? And I was like, okay, well, like, basically this. And he'd be like, cool, I'll put that in before lunch. and like do it. And it probably, I was in my early 20s at the time, so like probably a more experienced designer would have said, all right, well, let's really think about, like, I'm glad you're enthusiastic, but let's really think about this and see how it balances and see how it works out in the overall world. But he just kind of like, go off the fly on what we were talking about. So it was great in that, like, if he liked the idea, and he didn't like every idea. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it was a pushover. But if he liked the idea, then he would just implement it, like, before you had a second chance to think about it.
What was that like to work with?
I mean, I didn't have any other experience in working with another programmer. So, as opposed to someone who was brilliant enough to, like, take your little idea and fly with it. So, I mean, it was exhilarating, and sometimes led to bugs, frankly.
And when you moved on from Bethesda, when you left, and you worked with other programmers, was there like a period of culture shock there for you?
God.
And, yeah. Did you just assume like all programmers were like that, and like the next one after that, you're like, what's with this guy? And then the
I've been chasing that Julian type, my whole professional life. And again, I appreciate a lot of the people that I've worked with who are more cautious, and we'll say, well, let's weigh the pros and cons, and it's going to take this amount of work to do this, and is it really worth it? Isn't this like the werewolf and vampire thing, for example, in Daggerfall? Since I guess brought that up, is not something we ever advertised or said we're going to be doing. We just did it, and we figured that at some point the players are going to discover it and be like, "Wow, this is a really cool little like It's not fair to call it an Easter egg because it's a lot more involved in that. But it's a thing where, like, we don't say, "Hey, this is a feature," and that you just kind of discover as you play along. If you play it the right way, at the right time, like all of these things are like, it's not a great use of code to say, like, we're not following along the main gameplay path. We're just kind of like getting involved in this this side thing that we think is really cool. But it does fall into the line of, like, Daggerfall's overall, like, explore the world, and there's a lot of mysteries for you to uncover. So, like, I don't
Isn't
think
that
we
kind of
messed
the
up.
whole thing about like thinking about OLG and all that stuff, right? Where it's just kind of like, well, having those kinds of ideas and just kind of running with them. Clearly not a bad idea.
No, exactly. I think it turned out very well, but it was a thing that probably in a more corporate, formal environment would not have happened.
Well, I got to be honest with you. As we're talking, I'm getting a very different picture about Julian than I think we've seen before, which is, kind of like a cowboy. Very much a free spirit, a guy going out there willing to explore and have an adventure and tackle the with the confidence to tackle the problems that came from sticking your neck out for something you love.
It's funny because, like, I don't think that he would necessarily appreciate that characterization. However,
I'm sure he wouldn't.
But however, I do think that it's true. I mean, like, in the sense in the sense that, like, first of all, using the word cowboy, good Lord. I think he'd mostly be upset with that if it wasn't for Red Dead Redemption kind of redeeming that a little bit.
Right.
But aside from that, He never liked to think of himself as a passionate guy, right? Like, he always liked to think of himself as a very methodical, very logical guy.
Very rational, yeah.
Very rational, very methodical, not passionate at all. Well, I mean, like, passionate, but, like, obviously passion is important, but, like, just kind of, like, everything is, like, meticulous, and, like, just kind of, like, the decisions are made just so, but that was never actually the case. But that is how he liked to think of himself.
Well,
And so it's just one of those things where it's like the characterization, correct?
yeah.
But I don't know if you'd enjoy that.
Well,
I think he would go with confident, though. I think he might agree with confident.
Oh,
confident, definitely. Yeah, I mean, he knew what he could do, and he was aware of that, you know?
Well, I bring it up for a reason, and because I want to sort of get the pulse on what we're talking about here. So that's kind of like the maybe the picture of what we're building up toward. But when it came time for Julian to have a face inside the world that he was creating in Tamriel, that face became the Adric god Julianos, god of wisdom and logic. Now, I want to read this off here from the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. Julianos, Adric, god of wisdom and logic, is one of the Cyrodiilic divines governing the realms of literature, law, history, and contradiction. He's usually associated with magic and thus is often revered by wizards. So, it seems like he, and I'm not sure if this was him creating, a persona of himself inside the game, or if someone else had done this and was describing him. But it seems like, he was, a very adventurous, spirited man who really revered the art of discipline and making those logical transitions. And then when it came time to showing himself inside the game, as Ted did as well with Shae Gorath, he went with the
do you see how we're opposites?
There, I do see it. Yes. He went with the idea of himself that he liked to think of himself. Shae, and Ted, what do you think? What's closest to the truth here is, we're kind of talking about him as a passionate man that followed his pursuits and had the confidence and bravery to take on, whatever came after that? Or was he very much a measured, disciplined individual who, made logical steps?
I think both things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that, like, an ADHD diagnosis is very much a part of this. In the sense that, like, it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, well, things are exciting. You're gonna go where the dopamine goes. However, he did think logically and rationally about everything.
Right.
But
no programmer doesn't.
Right? Yeah. So, but also, like, the like kind of emotional steering wheel is kind of given over to that kind of dopamine seeking situation, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, well, this is interesting, but also you can still think extremely logically and extremely rationally about everything. But how that steers you is also, and I mean, I'd like you mentioned the contradiction thing.
Yes.
Which, like, I do not recall actually hearing that about Julianos, in which case I'm just kind of like, that makes sense. Not only in like his personality and all these other things, but also just kind of like in the way that he liked to think about things. Because for him, things were, well, on occasion black and white, but a lot of the time it was very important to kind of have both sides of an argument, right, and both, like, and just like being able to understand. You cannot understand without contradictions. You cannot understand without having some sort of, counter argument back and forth. Yeah, exactly. So, like, so I think that makes a lot of sense if that was part of his input, but I honestly doubt that and Ted will have to answer this one. I doubt that anything that happened with Juliana's was based on what my dad said or did. He had no say in it. It was other people making that
No, I
decision.
mean, he would have. I mean, it didn't pass anything, without Julian's approval on that. But I'm pretty sure because at the time we're creating the Aedra in Daggerfall, like a bunch of the Aedra were based on. I think all of the Aedra were based on like somebody involved in the project. So like it was a lot of testers, a lot of people we wanted to kind of honor for their contributions on that. But it would have been weird, especially. I think I probably came up with Shae Gorath before I came up with Juliana, so I'm like, I probably should throw Julian a bone and like create a character based on that, and again to make him the in some way the polar opposite of me. So I was the god of madness, and he was the god of logic. So trying to balance the two of those. So
which I've experienced in real life, and it works.
Kind of you to say.
I can't imagine what a night on the town must be like with Julian and Ted.
We had some good times.
Always fun.
I bring it up because I see there's a beautiful adventurous spirit that your father must have had. In order to embody both adventure and logic, a kind of slurry of logical chaos that must have been both beautiful and unique at the same time. And so I kind of wanted to just maybe present that as an idea and get your, both of your take on it. And I think we've definitely have done that, but that's the reason why I bring this up. How wonderful, beautiful, and unique that must have been in him. Yeah. So I won't belabor his credits further. We've got Dragon's Lair, we've got music for Where's Waldo, designer for Terminator, chief programmer in Terminator 2029. But then we move into Elder Scrolls. So lead programmer, Arena, project lead, Daggerfall. Okay, again, lead programmer, designer for Battlespire. So pretty amazing list here. If we go from music to programming to leading these projects.
He was always very opinionated still about music, by the way. We did have Eric Heberling on music in at least in Arena and Daggerfall. He might have done stuff for Terminator and some of the other games, but Julian was certainly the one we'd have to have in all the meetings to say, hey, if this music isn't quite working out, then explain to the composer what's not working out on it.
Really? Wow. So he was instrumental, not to, no pun intended. I didn't mean that. He was instrumental in choosing the who the composer would be for these games, and it seemed like more often than not he was going with Eric Heberling. And then here we are in Wayward Realms, and it's like, bam, we need Eric back on the team.
That's right.
Wow, what is it about Eric Heberling and Tamriel? Did he just, what was it about him and his composition that he just wanted to have?
I just don't know enough about music to be able to say like what Eric was doing that Julian was responding to. But I will say that on Wayward Realms, like when Eric was doing his initial compositions, then we're like sending them right away to Julian to say, hey, what needs to be tweaked, and he gave some input. But it was he was definitely well in this element.
He was definitely what?
Well in this element to be able to say like, okay, well, yeah, this is good, but like, tweak this.
My dad had a very a very long background in music. kind of knew how it was supposed to fit together and so on and so forth. And the kind of theatrics of everything and kind of figuring out how the music and everything kind of fits together with that was one of those things where he would like feel himself in the music, right? And so like if you're gonna get into the vibe of everything in the game that he was trying to create, right? Where he was just kind of like so instrumental in all the different parts of it, he was just kind of like, well, okay, but then this also has to be kind of the correct feeling. And I mean, obviously he would know that and he would know the things that kind of go into that. Um, but I will also say like, yeah, he's maybe known for like the Russia Heat and for having like, electropop or like for game music or anything like that. But one of his true passions like classical music. I mean, he played the piano, he played the flute, he actually played guitar and drums as well for a little bit, but like, but the piano is basically like, he would play that constantly and he became extremely good at it. And his like favorite composer was Chopin. And it's just one of those things like having these kind of like orchestral things, like more epic music rather than just kind of like a bunch of duck beats.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly the time that we were doing Arena and Daggerfall, it was all like MIDI music. So it was, more electronic, aiming towards being classical.
Oh yeah, but even then he could see like what Eric was doing, right? Like
it's obvious when you play Daggerfall, and you listen to Eric Heberling's music, it sounds different than the other music in similar games in that era. And again, I was talking about your father's adventurous spirit. That's the quality in Elder Scrolls music that I don't believe you get in any. I don't believe you get the level of adventure in the music than you have in Elder Scrolls for other games. When I'm playing Daggerfall, or if I'm playing other games in the series, and I mention that because I think Arena and Daggerfall with their music establish this. There has to be like Shae, you said, an epicness. There is an adventurous epic quality, almost like a wonder for wanderlust that exists in the music that you connect and identify with. And it's one of the things that keeps me coming back to the series, playing the game and hearing the music and making that emotional connection between what I'm doing and what I'm hearing. And it's there in Daggerfall, even if it's in MIDI music, it's there.
Yeah.
And it's there in, and I know Jeremy Soule did soundtracks for, Morrowind and Oblivion and Skyrim.
But then he was a naughty boy.
But
he was?
We'll talk about later.
Okay.
There's some controversy there.
Okay, I know nothing. I just know that I love his music.
Yeah, there's controversy, but
okay,
but
we'll talk about it later.
That's right.
Maybe what Jeremy Soule was going for is what had been established previously in Arena and Daggerfall, which is okay.
I'd like to think so, yeah.
Came from Eric, sure, but it that quality. If we're going to carry the game series forward, you got to have that quality of adventure there in the music still, and I think that was cemented in Arena and Daggerfall. So it's interesting to hear. As we're talking about Julian and understanding his love for exploration and how he had such an influence over deciding what the music was going to sound like in the game. And then, of course, you get that love of adventure and exploration in the music, too.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely a lot of personality.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot of personality there. Yeah, Ted, as you worked with Julian, let's kind of drill into some of the daily stuff here. Like, what was he like as a boss? Was he, a pain in the neck when you wanted to go on lunch break, or was he like
I think
the boss?
I don't think I ever went to lunch without him. So like certainly not a pain in the ass about that. And some of our best discussions. One of the things that I love so many things about my team on Wayward Realms, but when we actually have some real money, I would like to have an office, because there's a part where like the things that don't happen within the company, the things you talk about over lunch, the things when you go off to play Dungeons and Dragons or Vampire, after you're finished with your day, a lot of those decisions are things that were made outside of the office, but you have to be physically with each other to just start bouncing ideas, and the idea will come out of nowhere. So he was always lovely. I think he I wasn't at his programming team, so I can't speak to how it was with them. But he said nice things. Jennifer Pratt, who was one of the programmers, I think either on Arena or Daggerfall, when the announcement went out that Julian had passed, was quickest to say like, "Oh, he taught me so much," and it was really great. So, he's a super super sweet guy.
Okay,
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know if I can speak too much on this. Obviously, I wasn't around. But I will say that, like, as the announcement was kind of put out there, and everything when it came to my dad's illness, the amount of former subordinates, or whatever you want to call it, that called and just mostly credited him with just being a fantastic influence, and having been nice to know, I guess, kind of flooded in. Not just like through the comments, but like people were calling his phone. And given the circumstances, I was the one who picked up the phone, and I would end up having these conversations, and they would tell me all these stories about, how they were working under or with him. And it's just kind of crazy to see people come out of the woodworks from back in the 80s. And so I can't imagine
Yeah.
that, that's a bad sign
No.
when it comes to working kind of under him or having him as a boss.
It speaks to the level of love and appreciation and respect when a person quite literally comes out of a decades long shadow just to give you a call on the phone and say, "I'm sorry, and this is what it was like, and here's a great memory." um, that is probably one of the greatest tributes a person can receive on their passing. Speaking of tributes, I think everyone here knows, everyone listening knows the name Todd Howard. He gave some words on Julian's passing that I thought really cast a light not only on Julian, but also on Todd himself, calling Julian a driving force in the creation of Elder Scrolls and the foundations of Bethesda as a game studio. Quote, simply put, without Julian, we would not be here today. From Todd Howard himself. That is...
So I have a few things to say about that.
And Todd called.
But
sorry.
as you were saying, Todd called. I was here. I was kind of manning the phones, as it were, when Todd called. And I will say that, first of all, my dad never had anything but wonderful words about Todd. Which I remember when I didn't know his role and when I didn't know anything about it, I was just kind of like, "You're a part of Bethesda," and like I was like watching all this Bethesda stuff going down, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up with this guy? Everybody on the internet is saying stuff. And he was just kind of like, well, I mean, like, again, I don't know about what the stuff was, but I just remember that, like, there have been periods of upset for people with Bethesda, right? Where it's just kind of like, okay, I know they would badmouth Todd or whatever, because people will always want someone to blame for, like, hey, wait a minute, I'm not getting Elder Scrolls 6,
Well, he's been the face of
stuff
Bethesda for
like
a
that.
while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's kind of my point, right? But like, so, I didn't know anything about this, and my dad never talked to me about this, but, when I finally started understanding who Todd was and like what the whole situation was with him actually having a bigger role in Bethesda than I knew knew what it was before I knew who he was.
Sure.
Then he had never said a bad thing about it. Whenever I asked about anything Bethesda, he would just be like, "No, Todd is great. Stop it." But then when he finally called and like, I was there for the phone call. Like, it was obviously, I'm not gonna just air out what they were actually talking about, but I will say that the mutual respect and the way that Todd actually like reached out and spoke to my dad was probably one of the things that made him like kind of liven up near the end. It was one of those things that was kind of a reinvigorating conversation for him.
Well, I want to say that for me, as a fan of the Wayward Realms, and a person who's been following the project for a couple of years, I want to say that my interest was born in my discontent for the series, the Elder Scrolls series, and its direction. And like Ted was saying, Todd is very much the face of that. So it's not a huge leap to go from this series isn't turning out the way I think it should to Todd Howard, you're to blame for that. And so the whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and I certainly don't think that's the case. But what I think is the issue is I honestly think it's just bureaucracy. But going forward, I think it's very well known that the Wayward Realms is sort of the interest in the Wayward Realms is born out of that discontent for the direction of the series of the Elder Scrolls. And you would think like, okay, so maybe there's some bad blood there between, folks at Bethesda and folks at OnceLost Games. For Todd Howard to call and but to make those statements publicly, he didn't have to do that. He certainly didn't have to say what he said. You could tell there's so much, soul in the words that Todd Howard had regarding your father, Shae, that it casts both men in a very classy light. And for those who are anticipating the Wayward Realms, whether Elder Scrolls 6 is what we want it to be or not want it to be, I think we can all come away with this idea of, listen, everyone has mutual respect for one another, and let's be the same way. Let's follow your father's steps. Let's follow Ted's footsteps. Let's follow the footsteps of Todd Howard here, and let's just be respectful and classy too. And
and by the way, I would say again, reiterating everything that Shae said, but sort of the way Wayward Realms began was Julian doing a 4-hour YouTube video with someone who was saying like, "Hey, why did Elder Scrolls go astray, and what would you have done differently?" So, he didn't like the direction. Doesn't mean he didn't like the person.
Right.
Exactly. And I mean, I will always remember this, is that like there was always this thing about like my dad and I played Oblivion together. I remember him talking about like potentially calling Todd or something like that, and then saying like, hey, why the map so small?
And then he got smaller.
Hey, and here's the thing, I don't know, like from what I can recall my dad mentioning, and again, like this is like, third or fourth person like point of view, so don't take me at my word.
Sure.
But basically, it was just kind of like, so my dad was just kind of like, okay, so why the map's so small? And basically, they were just kind of like, math sucks.
I should not have taken a sip before that.
I mean, like, very much paraphrasing off of a paraphrase off of a paraphrase, but like, still, that's kind of the gist that I got, where I'm just kind of like, okay, you know what? And again, the fact that my dad could like call someone up at this point, just being like, hey, what up with this? Like, it's just kind of like, again, there is always going to be that mutual respect. There's always going to be that mutual understanding.
Yeah.
At least, as far as I'm aware, between my dad and Todd. And like, there are a few other people from the company whose names I don't necessarily remember because it's been a lot, honestly. So, but there always is that mutual respect where you can call someone, they can just kind of go, all right, we're just gonna talk to each other as people. Like, no one's a crazy god or
right,
anything
except for me.
True. Quite literally, yes.
That is right.
Sorry, an obvious opening.
So, moving on from well, maybe I don't know. I don't think I want to. I think I want to ask one last question here to Ted about the direction of Elder Scrolls while Julian was there. Arena, then Daggerfall, and then things started to kind of come undone a little bit. I know, Ted, you had left before Battlespire came out. What was Julian's vision for Elder Scrolls going forward after Daggerfall, and your vision for what was? I know you guys had you were talking about that vision of the future after Daggerfall. What was that? Did he have a vision going forward? I'm just,
Well, I think we just kind of wanted to keep on doing what we were doing, but do it better. So, not make a smaller world, not make a more restrictive, skill system. Like all of the decisions that were made, kind of, you can just watch as the stair steps down from Morrowind, which I really enjoyed playing, but like, okay, well, that's, to me, Morrowind was kind of like Battlespire, where he was like, okay, well, this is a smaller world, it's a more contained story, that's fine, and then it's like, okay, we're going to continue this tradition of making the world smaller and cutting back the skill systems and making everything much more linear, and all these things that we were definitely not doing in the first couple of Elder Scrolls. So that was the beginning of Wayward Realms, is Julian doing this interview saying like if he had stayed on with with Bethesda, how he thought the things were going to progress, and then I got on and said, more of a from the designer, writer point of view, like, yeah, I wish it wasn't so linear, and all of the stuff that we've basically been doing with Wayward. So that was the beginning of saying, hey, let's, we're not getting any younger. Let's try to make this game happen.
Did you call him? Did he call you?
I think while we were emailing, because at least as I recall, we've emailed each other over the years, before up to then. But I think initially I emailed him after he did like the 4.5 hour interview, and I was just making fun of him about like, it's so Julian that you can't shut up for 4.5 hours, and and then he's like, oh, he wants to talk to you too, and then I did the same thing. So.
That's a good mark of that's a mark of a good interviewer, that you can't get someone to shut up for 4 hours.
Oh no, it's you know you've. I don't think that the first podcast that we did, I put in like five words.
Yeah, it's easy.
I was gonna say, I don't think it has anything to do with the interview when it comes to my dad, at least. Like,
Yeah, like set him off, and
he did pass that off to me. If I had a chance right now, I would have not stopped talking. But like, I'm trying to learn.
I was going to give you a compliment. I was actually going to text you before this thing to say like, let me put in a few words sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing. I have learned. You know, other people are allowed to talk too. But also, I have so many thoughts and I have so many ideas, and I very much got that from my dad constantly.
Oh
so,
yeah,
you know,
she is definitely her father's daughter.
That I have a little girl,
oh yeah,
and she's just under 2 years old. Yes, I have a boy. He's 5. He's exactly like me. Just, I mean, the kid's got an arsenal in our sunroom of just foam weapons and plastic shields, and I mean and he loves playing Elder Scrolls games too. But my little girl, she's just under 2 years old, and to hear you speak that way about your father, I hope my girl will say the same thing about me too. There's that special connection. Like, I've got a special connection with my son, and it's wonderful. I adore him. And there's also a different kind of special connection with my daughter that's already there just before the age of 2, and it's really beautiful. So for me to hear you say that about your father warms my heart as a girl dad too.
I mean, I will say that, like, you know, I have a sister, which I guess is like not necessarily like all that well known, but she just hasn't been as much of a part of his life as I have been. So it just happens to be that my dad and I overlap, like personality wise, and just kind of like when it comes to a lot of different things, like we overlap a lot, whereas my sister does not necessarily in the same way. So, you know, but it's just one of those things. He always wanted daughters, and he and he always talked about Solon's lesson, right? Like, which, if you don't know about it, it's, I believe, Herodotus. But you know, about the fact that, like, you know
it's Herodotus.
Is it Herodotus?
Yeah.
I'm sure I know it's Herodotus. No. I can't. There are too many books. But anyway, so no, my point was just kind of like that, you know, like leaving your life knowing, like, the happiest man on earth is the man who is in the midst of death, knowing that he is leaving behind his children and his legacy to be better.
Yeah, I see it. I can see why that would be a truth that would echo so many years later, and held to this day, no matter what's changed. That's still being very true. Your father he seemed so, for as influential as he and Ted have been on the video game industry, intentional or not. Your father seemed very private, and so, you know, Ted, you know, you and Julian have so many fans of your work, and therefore so much love toward you and Julian, but we know almost next to nothing about you personally. You know, we know next to nothing about, you know, Julian personally, and so one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to, you know, tailor this episode in the way that it's been crafted is, you know, just to kind of let folks in who just appreciate, you know, you, Ted, and Julian and your work, kind of let us in a little bit and kind of get a glimpse of, you know, Julian as the man, not just, you know, an influential programmer for a video game series that you know is to say beloved is still an understatement. And going with that, I sort of want to ask a little bit about, after Julian had left Bethesda and reuniting with Ted for Wayward Realms, Shae, can you describe a little bit about your father's initial reaction in working again with Ted in a professional manner and working on this vision of the Wayward Realms?
Well, you know what's so the first thing that's really interesting about it is that and I think that so I have this friend who, does YouTube and so on and so forth. He did a whole video about my dad, and I didn't even realize this until he made the video after my dad passed. That he did not know who my dad was. Despite being an avid gamer, knowing my dad's like Julian LeFay, he knew him as that. He had known the legend of the industry for so long. And he didn't know who my dad was until about a month before he passed.
Wow.
And he kept saying that, and I was like, wait, I've known this guy for like 15 years. And he's met my dad a lot of times, and he didn't know who my dad was. And so my point is, when it comes to kind of like the Wayward Realms and OnceLost games and everything like that, I kind of had to figure everything out on my own. I'm an avid gamer. I'm an avid gamer, and I'm generally just a big nerd. And I kind of found out about the game. My dad had mentioned, oh yeah, he's doing like a thing with Ted. Wow. Okay, cool. Knew who Ted was. He had talked about him before. I'd met him when I was a kid. But he didn't tell me anything really about it. It wasn't until I was I was playing Savage Worlds TTRPG with a bunch of my other friends, and they were just kind of like, hey, so I heard your dad's doing this thing, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Wow. What a way to find out.
So again, my dad had casually mentioned it. Yeah. And then it wasn't until so my DM during the TTRPG I was doing had mentioned this, that I then started asking a lot of questions, and then I ended up meeting one of I believe he was a producer who also lived in Denmark, when my dad came over to visit. And then I asked him so many questions about it that eventually he was just kind of like, hey, you want to actually join the team? Because I had a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas. But before that, my dad would just kind of like I said, my friend didn't know who he was, in spite of his record and stuff like that. He just didn't talk a lot about his projects.
Wow.
For him, I think that his passions were his private project. He was just kind of like, ooh, whatever I'm passionate about, I'm gonna do on my own. So I'm gonna sit and focus about it.
What did he talk about?
What didn't he talk about?
Really? Wow.
Well, we were talking about how obsessive he was about certain projects or whatever he was working on. So it'll be, history or literature or, a different stage, cooking, iron working.
Yeah, no, he made armor, and
he made armor.
Well, that's what we're saying about our necklace.
Yeah, I can bring you a helmet right now if you want to see it.
Let's see the helmet.
I got the gauntlet. The gauntlet was one of the things that I shipped home, but Ted's seen it, and the gauntlet is one of the things that was very contentious. Everybody wanted the gauntlet.
Oh.
I think you said that your necklace has a couple of rings of his.
Oh yeah. That's right.
Is it one ring for the to rule them all?
One ring to rule them all. Yeah. No, so this is the what's it called? Thor's hammer that he used to wear. He used to wear this all the time.
Did he make that?
No, he did not make this.
Oh, okay.
However, these rings, and this is one of his more simple work, but he did make these rings out of silver.
Wow.
And they're beautiful, like actually stacked on the fingers and stuff like that. I just know that I would keep having to take them off with everything that I'm doing. So,
Sure.
but give me one sec.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get some.
Yeah, he has workshops all over the house.
Oh, don't get me started.
Julian made armor. We're hearing about a gauntlet. I mean, this is incredible stuff.
Well, that's what we're saying. Is like as soon as he became interested in like, hey, how do you do this? Well, now I need to know everything.
So, I mean, Ted, did you know Julian the armor smith? I mean, did he have an anvil at Bethesda and he was just smashing?
He didn't have one at Bethesda. Yeah, so that was I guess a relatively new passion, but not maybe I don't know, maybe 20 years or something like that. But post Bethesda, but
Yeah. Post
I
Bethesda.
don't know if you guys can hear me.
We can hear you.
We can't see you if you're trying to be seen.
No, I'm outside the door. I'm just like trying to figure something out. I'm just saying, like, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, he went through a million different phases of a million different things and hobbies and stuff like that. Okay, so first of all,
right. So we have what looks to be a chainmail coif.
Exactly. So this is something that he made. This is not one of the things that he was like super proud of. I will say, like, here's the thing: he wasn't not proud of it, but also,
how long did it take to make that? Did he make every ring on that thing?
Yeah.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, I mean, like, I will be happy to take people on a tour once the house is cleaned up a little bit. But yeah, I also actually. Oh no, that was also sent home. I sent a lot of the armor home yesterday because that was the stuff that was kind of important for us to have. So it's stuff that's not going to be shipped on a container to go home, but like in the luggage of my boyfriend to make sure that it gets home properly.
Right.
And I will say, I cannot guarantee that he made this, but I do believe that he did. He's made a lot of different stuff, and it looks very much his style, and just based on kind of the finishing and everything like that. I have archaeology eyes, and like my brain will just connect these dots together too much.
That's
But
Shae's
anyway.
background, by the way, archaeology.
Oh yeah. I studied archaeology.
Wait, hold on a sec. You study archaeology? That's fantastic.
Yeah,
how interesting.
I dropped out of my master's program when my dad got sick.
Right.
So that I could come over here and help him out and stuff like that. But yeah, I plan on going back to it, and I've been wanting to do it since I was like 8 years old. So my dad was very proud and very excited about me becoming an archaeologist. So
you can imagine. Mr. History guy.
Yeah,
it was very much his jam. So
wow.
And it was it's also hopefully going to be like of use to the game and stuff like that. I have a lot of input when it comes to like some of the writing. I'm just kind of like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Can't help myself. Although to be fair, like I haven't done that for a while, but I'm gonna get back to it.
Wow.
No, we definitely need more people with opinions.
Yeah, and those I have a lot of. I got that from my dad.
So let's.
But anyway, the helmet.
Yeah, beautiful. Now I'm looking at this helmet, and I'm immediately reminded of the helmet style for the Bretons in Elder Scrolls Online.
Okay. See, I wouldn't know enough about that, but I'm guessing because of it being called the Bretons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that they're based on English soldiers, presumably around the 13th, 12th century.
Well, we invented the Bretons before Elder Scrolls Online.
Yes, but my point is just kind of like that it's probably based on that, right?
I don't know. I didn't work on Elder Scrolls Online.
No.
Well, based on the helmet style.
Yeah, Ted. So was the Breton race, really more like, Western European, early British?
I think we would have called it Britons, but it was too on the nose.
Yeah.
So we went with the Bretons, which was a real group also, but so that's more French English than English.
Right.
Yeah.
French English, not English. Okay.
Well, like Britannia,
Yeah.
Bretons. Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like the bones of the lore still hold up to this day in the series. What you and Julian developed is still being honored mostly in how the games are reflected and the people are being reflected in the games today.
Hope so.
I mean, I will say that I remember, and again, this is like I've gone through phases of not necessarily knowing my dad's kind of influence or who he was truly, because he was just my dad, right?
Sure.
I do recall playing Skyrim, knowing that he had something to do with Bethesda at this point. Like to a large extent, but like again, not really internalizing it as well. And I remember I was sitting around, and the amount of times like I was playing Skyrim, and like he would walk by the screen behind me, and then he would just go, "I invented that."
Little did you know he was being literal.
I know exactly, like where I was just kind of like, "Okay, yeah, no, good for you, dude." But meanwhile, I'm just kind of like,
don't try to impress your kid.
No, but like here's the thing, he wasn't even trying to impress me. He was just kind of like pointing it out. Because like if he was trying to impress me, he would have pointed it out decades earlier.
Right.
But he didn't. It was just like as I was sitting around playing it, he was just kind of like, "Oh, I invented that."
Oh, that's very sweet. I like. All right. So your father was obviously he obviously became ill. He had cancer. Um, after his diagnosis, how did his life's focus shift? What became priorities for him, if anything at all, and how did things change for you, Shae?
Well, I think that this is one of those things where it's just kind of like there are so many answers to this, but I will
Yeah.
say that like I think the main thing is that it actually didn't change. I think it just did the exact same thing that anything else has done in his life, where it became a passion for him. Like he found a passion, and so the focus for him very largely, like there were two main focuses I think since his diagnosis. Well, no, three maybe, but um, the first one was he learned literally everything about molecular biology and about cancer and about cancer research, and he like had intellectual discussions with his doctors, and they did everything more or less based on his recommendation because he did more research than any cancer doctor probably ever has.
I'm sure he drove them crazy, or some of them crazy.
Probably some of them. But but to a large extent also I didn't get that vibe from them whenever I was talking to them.
They were always lovely.
It was always no, but my point was just kind of like they never seemed like they were exhausted with him. They were more just kind of like, okay, we get that he's super passionate about this.
And knowledgeable.
Just like everybody else, where it's just kind of like no one was ever like overwhelmed by his kind of like pushing his knowledge forward. It was just kind of like, okay, well, he's just really excited about this, and most people just kind of saw that. And so like when it came to his first diagnosis and like his treatment, that became a huge focus. Again, he would talk about all these things where like I know a decent amount about like medical science and stuff like that because I had to take care of him. I came over here for the last 3.5 years on and off to come help him out. So I was doing a lot of research. And I knew a lot of stuff. And I learned a lot of the nursing, how to take care of someone who's going through this stuff. And yet, the amount of like phrases and terms and everything that he would use, most of the time I wouldn't be able to follow. Uh, and then the second thing was that he did like become like really interested in the Ukrainian war. And largely due to the fact that like I mean he watched what 20 days in Mariupol and 10 days in Mariupol, and I think that that's the thing that really propelled him. But aside from that, um I asked him like, can we talk about something else at one point, because he was talking about it a lot, and I was like, hey, I need a little break from hearing about Ukraine war updates. And he would say to me that like he would love to do something else. He would love to focus on something else. But for him, it felt pointless because if it couldn't be applied, if it wasn't knowledge or anything useful that he could use or do something with, then it just felt pointless because at this point he knew he was terminal. And it severely affected him. But that's also like it following the Ukrainian war was like something for him that it overlapped some of his previous interests in military strategy and weaponry and stuff like that. He had an interest in that at one point or another.
Yeah.
But then also knowing that he could follow along, but that nothing that he could do was going to change the outcome, so that it was comfortable for him to follow along with.
Yeah, when we think of comfort, we think of the Ukrainian war.
No, but you know what I mean, right? Though, like,
No. I totally get you, but I had to say it.
I can kind of connect with that a little bit. In the way that, when you're so hyper focused on problem solving, looking at a problem that you cannot solve, but you can sort of sit on the sidelines a little bit and watch the problem and either identify, kind of like, I don't know, just sit on the sidelines, and spectate a problem that you're passionate about is somehow,
but still kind of see an answer, right? Like, yeah.
oddly therapeutic in a way. With so I guess I'll say it. I am a retired police officer from the NYPD, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And as a result, I have some pretty intense emotional triggers. And you would think an individual that's like that would sort of stay away from like hot button issues. And for the most part, I do, because I'm just not in that life anymore. And, this is my life, and thank God for so. But I still like check in every now and again on some hot button issues. And my wife is always like, hon, stay away from these things. Doesn't this make you upset hearing about it? And I'm like, oddly, no, it doesn't make me upset. In a way that would like trigger my PTSD. You get passionate, you get a little, upset. Like, I can't believe that's going on. Like, you have those normal emotions, but in no way does it like hurt, my diagnosis. And so I can kind of understand, your father in a strange sense. It may have taken him away from the trouble of being diagnosed with cancer and understanding. You said, he knew at some point he was terminal, so I can understand that.
Yeah, but I mean, like, a part of the research and everything that he was doing was he kept trying to put off how long it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
So, but that being said, like, his like sympathy and understanding for the situation that was going on in Ukraine, I think was just kind of like a way to kind of like distract himself from his own kind of having to deal with the diagnosis and like
Yeah.
having to internalize his own depression. Instead, he could kind of manifest it in what the suffering and everything that they were going through over there was.
Right.
But I will say that, like, you know, like the other thing that like kind of really spurred him on, like he was so adamant, and the thing that kind of kept him going way longer than he probably should have was that he was so adamant about going back to Denmark and about spending the rest of his time there with me and my sister and his granddaughter and his ex-wife, who also, like, so my mom, but she came over here to help me take care of him as well.
Right.
And so, you know, he really wanted to see my sister and he really wanted to see his granddaughter. And until the very end, basically, like, he was in denial about actually being in the process of passing away until the very last second, because he would not stop talking about the fact that I just have to make it to Denmark. I just have to be able to get on a plane. I just have to be able to do that. And so the focus very much also became on just, I need to be close to people. I need to, like, be there with my closest.
Yeah.
And it never happened, mostly because he was in so much denial about everything. He kept saying, hey, well, if I get this therapy, if I get this surgery, then I can live a couple of weeks longer, and then it'll be easier for me to go to Denmark because right now I can't travel. You know, like, it kept being like that until, like, you know, it was too much in the end.
Yeah. I mean, wow. That's some really powerful statements there, you know, to be, you know, parsing out how much more time you've got left in such a way. I can't imagine.
I will say the only thing I kind of add on to that is I think at the last team meeting he was on, and we had made the announcement that you know, obviously to the team first, and then to the rest of the world, that he was not long for the world, and we just said, you know, we didn't want to just like spring this on you that, you know, like, he's passed, and Shae had let us know, you know, now's the time if anyone wants to say anything to him, and so many team members like immediately, you know, jumped on to give messages to Julian about, like, you know, how much his participation and his, you know, career and everything, how much he meant to them. And I don't know, like 20 or so, 30 people or you know, like, love messages. And then when he jumped on, I guess it was like a Friday team meeting, and he just read all of the responses out loud and replied in person to each one of them. And we're over there in the hospital going like, you don't really have to do this like one by one, like to everyone. He's like, no, they deserve it. So that
How long
was,
did that take?
you know,
A couple hours?
yeah.
Yeah. I remember, like, so, you know, when the messages started, like, coming in and stuff like that, you know, I was always the like messenger when it came to my dad when he was in the hospital and kind of trying to figure everything out, right? The when the messages kind of started coming in, they were talking about the fact that, oh, well, they needed to have a meeting about what was going to happen when he was, like, no longer around. And my dad was so insistent. He was like, I need to be there. I need to be at this meeting. I have to be there. And this was the last meeting, and it was so important to him. And I remember saying, like, do you, like, it's okay. Like, because he couldn't, and this is a grim picture to put out of him, but, like, I don't think that he'd mind too much. But, like,
Okay.
but, you know, he you know, he wouldn't really get out of bed. He couldn't really walk. He couldn't really do much of anything. And yet I set up a small station for him with, like, his tablet and everything. and he was sick and felt horrible, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because it's a lot of work for him to like get up and sit at the desk and like have to have these conversations with kind of tubes coming out of him and everything." Um, but he was like, "No, this is important,"
Yep.
and he did that a couple of days before he went into hospice, basically. Um,
Wow.
it was so important for him because he knew, like, and I think that the most important thing for him in this regard was that he saw that the dedication and the effort that the team was making, including their messages and all that stuff, was just kind of like he couldn't not acknowledge that. That would have been too much for him.
Yeah.
Like that people cared that much and that he wouldn't acknowledge it would have destroyed him. So that was the most important thing to him, honestly, nearing the end, was having that one last meeting where he responded to literally every message that he had received at that given time.
Yeah, and then there were a couple of messages that came afterwards, and I was like,
Yeah.
like, oh, here's another one. He's like, well, I'm not sure if I'm quite ready for that one, but I was like, quick, your message did get through to Julian, so.
Yeah, he heard every single one of them. And he also heard a lot of the messages on, like, for the comments after it was announced that he had cancer.
Yeah.
Well, from like fans and
Yeah. Like I would sit around and I would read them to him. So he did hear a lot of it. And it changed his energy. And it was really nice.
yeah,
So,
and when Shae and I were hanging out, after Julian passed, we were online, and that was our way to pass the time, is to say, "Oh, this is very sweet," and occasionally something would come through that was just funny. So we were just like,
there were funny and or extremely insensitive, horrible comments. But those were mostly funny.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, sorry, I don't know what your question was anymore.
No, it's you're right there. You're giving the answer. You know, I'm listening. The listeners are listening, and I want to tell you that there's a reason why. There's a reason why there's so much love there. What Ted, what you and Julian have built with the Elder Scrolls and the promise of what's to come is just so exciting. Every look, we live in a very precarious and yet overly a complicated world. Many of us long for things that are simpler, a simpler life. With so many issues that are happening in our modern day, and with so much easy access to understanding what those issues are, at least hearing about it. There isn't a person out there that doesn't feel, like they want to get out there and do something for somebody in some way. Me being a police officer was very much born out of, I just want to get out there and do something and help. My time as a police officer was in the age of terrorism in New York City. And it was born out of wanting to do something about 9/11 and helping in whatever way that meant for me and my two hands to do. The world that you and Julian created gives an outlet for that. We want to go out there and not just be heroes for our own sake, but we want to go out there and feel like we've, slayed the dragon, that we've helped the people, that we've brought some justice where there wasn't some, or comfort where it was lacking. And what's beyond the horizon and under the broad skies, and let me go out there with my own 2 feet, or mount that horse and go out there and figure it out. And I cannot with all that's come before the Elder Scrolls, what you and Julian created, did it in such a beautiful, unique way. It connected, that spirit of adventure to the pixels on the monitor. So all of that love that Julian received is there because your work created a connection with folks you don't even know and have never met in a way that's very unique, quite singular, and we look forward to that in this new project, and to know that you, Ted, and Julian got together to see this last piece, and the fact that it meant so much to Julian, especially at the end, really means a lot to those that are going to be playing this game, knowing that so much heart and soul and passion has been poured into it, just so we can go out there and make those connections again. That's why all that love is there.
Yeah. Appreciate your words.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, and I don't think that it's lost necessarily on any of us.
Before we close out, Shae, I want to get final thoughts from you and then from Ted on the life of your father, the life of your colleague. Just some final thoughts, some last words on Julian. Go ahead, Shae.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot to say here. But I will say that, he always said, there are always two things that I think that he highlighted very much before he passed away. And those are things that I've really taken to heart. And that is that he lived more than the next 10 people in his lifetime. And to be fair, I'm already kind of there with him. So you know what? I'm kind of taking that and running with it, because I think that sounds really nice. He had a lot of regrets, he said, but also at the same time, that's okay.
No one's perfect.
But again, always remember Solon's lesson. That is, if you haven't read about it, please look it up. It is very much worth everything, and it kind of made everything a lot easier in general when it came to him passing away, and when it came to just kind of living life right now. For me, he taught me that. And yeah, that's pretty much. I don't know how much more I can say, honestly.
Beautiful. Ted?
No, I was going to reiterate what Shae said is, if you've ever played the drinking game, never, ever, ever, like he would, whichever way it's played, he'd either be drunk really quickly or never drink. Like if you're supposed to drink every time that you've done whatever is on the list, he's undoubtedly done it. So,
Yeah.
crammed a lot into his 59 years. So as we've discussed on that, and again, worked with him over the years, and as Shae said, so much respect from the people that he's worked with and under him. And Bethesda was not an easy place to work in those days, and Julian has commented on it publicly before. But he was definitely. It's no surprise that he was the one who I stayed in contact with after I left Bethesda, because we definitely had a real connection. So really definitely want to do him proud with Wayward Realms, and that's the plan.
Thank you, Shae and Ted, for sharing not just your thoughts but your memories on Julian. I hope that this was able to give a little extra connection to our listeners, maybe a little extra closure where it needed to happen. And I want to thank you, dear listener, for listening and giving us your time. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.